Welcome, everyone, to the webinar tonight. We'll give everybody just a second to get logged on here. We're so happy to have people join us tonight from all across North Carolina, and we appreciate your interest in our webinar tonight with Superintendent Mo Green. We're very excited to hear about his vision for the department, some of the things he's working on, and we're very happy to have you here. So to get started, Superintendent Green, if you don't mind, everybody knows you're the superintendent, but tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to this point in your life and what motivates you. And how did we get Superintendent Green?
Great, thank you. And thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to have a conversation with the folks this evening. What I'll share is both on a professional side and then on a personal side, if you will. On the professional side, I'll start with college. I did go to Duke University and then follow that up by going to Duke University School of Law. And then after law school, I did 2 judicial clerkships, one here in North Carolina and the second one in Cincinnati, Ohio, both federal clerkships, so trial level and then Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Came back and worked in a law firm, and very interesting. And you ask, how did I get here? When I first started at the law firm, it was Smith, Helms, Mullis & Moore in Charlotte. The law firm had just gotten the engagement to represent the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. And they needed both partners and associates to work with that client, and I was assigned to work for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. And while I certainly had many other clients, one of my favorite clients was CMS. And stayed at the law firm, became a partner in that law firm, and then left the law firm to become the general counsel for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. Did that for a number of years, and then actually now several superintendents ago, Dr. Peter Gorman was hired as superintendent, and he asked me to shift from being the general counsel, the top lawyer, if you will, to become the number 2. We started off calling it the chief operating officer, then became the deputy superintendent. Did that for a couple of years, and it was actually Dr. Gorman that said, Mo, you need to be a superintendent, and I know where you need to be a superintendent is in Guilford County Schools. And so took his advice and applied for that position, was honored to be selected, became, I'm told, the first non-traditional, if you will, superintendent in the state of North Carolina. The law had just changed a few years before I became superintendent, and first one that didn't have sort of that traditional education background. Was superintendent for 7 years, and then left that to become the executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, one of the largest foundations in North Carolina. And so I was there for 7 years, had retired, and was enjoying retirement. Promised my wife we would drive across the country, brought a brand new car that we we're going to drive across the country with. And Roy Cooper, one of his folks, reached out to me, ultimately had a conversation with Governor Cooper about asking me to run for this position. And I tried to figure out how to say no and could never get to a no. I don't know why. I just could never get to a no. And so I did say yes. And so here I am. On a personal side, I will just lift up that my mother was a special education teacher. She did any number of things before becoming a special education teacher, but including being a nurse and a business owner, and then finally did what she always wanted to do. And so I was greatly influenced by her. My wife is a school psychologist. Now, she hasn't done that for many years, but she actually was the first employee in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools in our family.
Wow.
And then we do have 2 adult children, both of whom were educated in our public schools. And then finally, May, a little bit more personal. I do like to read. I love sports. And so, can happily talk about, NFL, the Panthers, and Duke basketball, and the
Okay.
Atlanta Braves. Those would be my top teams. Thanks
And
again for having me on. Look forward to the conversation.
well, now we know all your favorite teams. And I should have said at the very beginning, I'm Yvonne Brandon. I am Chair of Public Schools First NC. And joining me tonight to have this conversation with Superintendent Green is Shanika Moore Brown, who is the NC PTA President, a true advocate for our parents and teachers and their work in our public schools, as well as a professional herself, working in a field very akin to your wife's field in social school psychologist. Shanika, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you ask Mo our first question.
Yes, and I was telling Superintendent Green and Yvonne that I am leaving a pantry where I was packing because we do have a big passion about food insecurity. So I do apologize for being in my vehicle as we are having this call. But I'm so excited, Superintendent Green, have been a longtime fan of yours and all of the great work that you've done, not only for public education, but also while you at the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. Question is, what are the main areas that you and your administration will focus on over the next 4 years?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And just so folks understand, 2 things. One, I just want to be sure that you absolutely can refer to me as Superintendent Green or something like that, but please know I go by Mo. Secondly, the way that I like to operate is to first start with a vision, then figure out what it's going to take for us to achieve that vision, and then get to work on it. And so the vision for my administration is achieving educational excellence, which is the successful coupling of academic achievement and character development. And then we use a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. And then the word excellence is critically important because I've not been bashful about saying we are going to be the very best public education system in the United States. That's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take commitments from all of us, but I want the bar to be set exceedingly high. So that we understand what the mission is and how we'll go about it. There are some pillars that we'll be utilizing to get to that vision. They include certainly preparing each and every child for whatever's next for them. We'll invest fully. We need to invest fully in our public education. We need to revere educators, our public school educators. We need to certainly enhance parent and community support. Need to provide, ensure safe and secure learning environments. And then we need to celebrate the good in public education. From there, so you have the vision, you have some pillars. Now it's about filling in, the initiatives and goals and timelines for us to have that vision become a reality. And part of that then filling in, if you will happen as a result of having many conversations with many folks. I do what's called a listening and learning tour. It's called Mo Wants to Know. We'll have sessions with folks where in some instances we'll invite people in specifically to have conversations. We'll also go out to all parts of North Carolina. We have already set up 8 locations across the state where anyone can come and have a conversation with me. And then you can also provide thoughts on our website. If you go to the state superintendent link on that website, you'll see something called Mo Wants to Know, and you can put in your thoughts there as well.
Well,
Thank you, Superintendent Green. That's awesome.
And really, I love all the ways that folks can participate. And I really appreciate that you're starting this position, asking all of us kind of what we think too, because the people who are on this call tonight, I am positive, are here not only to meet you, but also they're here because they support public education so strongly. So, here we are. It's that time. Every 2 years, the General Assembly gathers together for what they call the long session. And during that time, they create the new 2-year budget that will be used all across all of our school districts, the 2-year education budget. And so what will DPI be asking legislators to focus on the most during this time?
Right. So a bit of context, I think is important. First of all, as part of the way that I'm operating is I have decided that I'm going to, in every instance possible, try to have a joint effort with the State Board of Education, with the strategic plan that will be developed as a result of the listening and learning tour. There will be a joint strategic plan. The same thing then is true with the legislative priorities. In fact, the state board approved the priorities at their February meeting. The second thing I'll say, just as far as context is, and you're exactly right, Yvonne, we are, at the same time, we're talking about a strategic plan that we want to put in place probably around June or so. Recognize that there are things that folks have to focus on right now for this next 2 years with the General Assembly. And so we have put together some priorities, recognizing that there may be other things that come out of the strategic plan as well. The things that I'll lift up, and you can go to the website and see the full list and be happy to share more as you would like. But the things that I would lift up would include certainly providing additional support for students and staff in Western North Carolina who are still recovering from the impacts of the storm Helene. And those would include both facilities needs as well as other supports. We also have highlighted that we need to increase teacher and educator pay. We've decided to set, at least at this point, that we want to have the highest average teacher pay in the Southeast. The latest reports will put us at that are released by the National Education Association, puts us in about 5th place out of 12 southeastern states. We also want to restore master's pay as well. Next is refreshing technology devices in our schools. And so many districts went to one-to-one as a result of COVID. Those devices were purchased in many instances with federal dollars. Those devices are nearing their lifespan, the end of their lifespan, and so need to think about how to refresh them with new devices. And so we have put in a request to do that. And this will then become an ongoing effort, we hope, with the General Assembly. And in some ways, we'll start to think about how this will reduce the need for textbooks, as many things now are going online. We want to increase the number of nurses, counselors, social workers, and school psychologists. Each of the positions there, national organizations puts out sort of what they believe would be an appropriate ratio of person and position to students. The short version is we are so far away from those ratios that there's much work to be done. And so the request will allow us to hire about 600 additional folks to help our students with mental health and other needs. Will get us closer to those ratios. Will not get us fully there, but much closer. We want to increase funding to support students with disabilities. And so there's lots of conversation been going on in the General Assembly to change the way that they fund students with disabilities, doing it on a much more of a weighted formula, meaning that the students who have the most significant of issues would receive the most dollars. Those who have the least would receive the least. I'm fully on board with having that conversation, but it must be coupled with, we need more funding no matter where the students fall on that spectrum. And so we've made a request there. Next would be expanding literacy instruction efforts. So we've done some work, as y'all hopefully know, in our early grades to focus on the science of reading. We want to certainly continue that and expand it. Ultimately, want to move with this request into the middle grades. We've made a request for additional funding for school construction. The latest report suggested we have about $13 billion in needs across our state. And so while there is some funding that the General Assembly has provided for this, it's not nearly enough. And then the last one that I'll lift up is actually one that focuses on encouraging the General Assembly to place a moratorium on the expansion of the state's taxpayer-funded private school voucher program. Some will know it as the Opportunity Scholarship Program. So that, because one of the things we're already hearing is that the budget for these next 2 years is either going to be basically flatline or may actually be negative compared to the year before when you get into the second year of the biennium. And so we then know that folks will say, well, where are we going to find efficiencies, what cuts we're going to make so we can balance the budget. And the state board and I are very clear in saying one of the very first places you need to go is to this taxpayer-funded private school voucher program, because indeed, there are more funds needed into our public education system, and that is the constitutionally required place to put education dollars.
I really have to commend you for those budget agendas. Of course, we know teacher pay is always incredibly important, and so is all the educators in the building and their pay. So I appreciate your acknowledgement of that. And I would also just say that as someone who has spent a lot of time studying adverse childhood experiences and resilience and these kind of things, we know that having helping professionals, nurses, school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors in the building it's just essential to help make sure that our kids are getting the services they need and making it possible for them to learn and to be in school. And a lot of folks don't quite know what those folks do. They understand counselors and nurses, but our school social workers and school psychologists are critical to the success of making sure our kids are tested, that they're identified and put in the right programs, have the right services. But we're going to talk about that another night on a webinar. But Dr. Moore Brown.
Thank you, Yvonne. And Superintendent Green, and I know you said we could refer to you as Mo, but I'm going to refer to you as Superintendent Green. I would say that in CPTA, we have lots of our members on the call watching and listening. And so I will tell you that much of what you said is aligned to our 4 advocacy priorities that we have. We have partnered with Public Schools First NC on many efforts aligned to what you shared. So very excited and grateful that you are also championing those items as well. So let's get into the next question, because this is going to be a big one. A lot of talk is going on about closing the U.S. Department of Education. What impact, Superintendent Green, would that have on North Carolina, and how much money would be lost to our state?
Great, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. And so please know that I and my team, that we are certainly following the actions that are being taken by the federal government, including those related to the U.S. Department of Education. At this point, given all of the things that are going on, all of the comments that are being made, there isn't at this point a what I would call an actionable plan that they say, this is what we're going to do. So it's going to be, not possible to share what the full impact will be at this point. What I do want to do, though, is maybe provide a little bit of context so folks can see that it could range pretty dramatically, right? So first of all, a little bit of context. North Carolina receives about $1.2 billion or so annually from our federal government for any number of different things, including, I'll just lift up three major areas. Those would be Title I dollars that go to serve students who are attending schools who are have a lot of low-income students. Our Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, so IDEA, students with disabilities. And then not coming directly from the Department of Education, but another $500 million plus comes from U.S. Department of Agriculture to feed our children, right? So these are, you can hear hopefully in this, that we're talking about impacts to all students, but really, in many ways, our most at risk or most precious, whatever words you want to utilize to really, lift up the impacts of certain of our students. So the second thing I'll say is at the far end of the spectrum would be if the Department of Education were fully eliminated and the dollars that they administer were eliminated as well. So that's like the worst case scenario, right? And so you're talking about that $1.2+ billion annually. You're talking about, for North Carolina, that's about 10% of districts' budgets. It varies depending on the district, but you're talking about literally hundreds of positions, thousands across our districts in our state, right? That is, folks say, well, what's the plan if the far end is what ends up happening? It's hard to imagine a plan that basically says we're not going to fund our students with special needs to the levels that they need to be funded. Our students who are, our low-income students, they're not going to get those additional resources that they need. That is the far end. Now, it is probably more likely that something short of that will happen, that it's, that what you might see is you might see the elimination of the Department of Education over time, but you may still see that the dollars that they administer, at least some level of them, will still be distributed to the states. You've heard perhaps about block grants coming to the state. So it may be that, I've heard the Department of Health and Human Services might take over education administration. So that may happen. And so then the question is, how much comes to the state and what forms it comes to the state? And, there's some discussion about some of these dollars being spread beyond public schools. So even if the dollars were to remain the same, are they now going to be spread to non-public schools as well, which would obviously impact public schools. So in the meantime, some things have started to, at least they've started rolling out a few things there. And for those who are on the call who might not know, I'm going to talk about two major buckets. One is what I would say formula dollars, like the Title I dollars, the IDEA dollars. They come out in a formula and everybody gets what you get according to that formula. And then there are discretionary dollars where the Department of Education might say we'll have some kind of competitive grant program and the winners of that grant will receive those dollars. So what you're already seeing is some discretionary dollars being impacted, because if you're paying attention over the last week or so, you've seen that dollars that are going to help districts, for example, recruit and retain teachers. Those grants, discretionary grants, have been, they cut them. Now, there has been lawsuits that have, and judges' decisions that have, put a stop to those, actions, but you can begin to see where they're headed, right? And, it is possible that you'll see more discretionary grants being eliminated in the short term.
Okay, well, I will tell you that we're getting questions in the question box, and I do want us to save some time for that. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and very scary what's going on, and I appreciate your answer. So we've been hearing a lot about you having a listening tour. You talked about the ones coming up and all that kind of stuff. So how's it going so far? I mean, what are you hearing? What do you feel?
Yeah, so it is, I would say it's going well. I've had lots of conversations with folks. People have put in many comments into our website opportunity as well. So what I'm hearing almost depends on who I'm speaking with, right? I will just lift up maybe just a few things to highlight. One would be lots of issues related to teachers. So you're hearing things about there are not enough teachers. You're hearing folks who say, my child has had a substitute teacher in math for most of the year. Related issues around compensation for educators and challenges with licensure for teachers. So that's a huge issue. Certainly the question that you just asked, or was just asked of me, related to what's happening at the federal level, that has been a huge conversation. Almost everybody wants to know what in the world is going on, right? And what impact will it have on us? The third one I'll lift up is there are lots of folks who have lifted up questions and deep concerns about the taxpayer-funded private school voucher program. And the way that folks have framed it is that impact on public schools, the loss of revenue on public schools as a result of that expansion, particularly the expansion of this program, and then the lack of accountability. So how do we know that those dollars that are going to now private schools are being well spent, that students who are attending those schools are getting a good education? And then the last thing I'll just lift up is something that you heard me when I talked about the pillars that we'll be addressing, is people will say to me, Mo, folk just do not know all of the good things that are going on in our public schools. The headlines dominate with all of the concerns and issues and shortcomings and things of that nature. And meanwhile, there are amazing things happening each and every day in our public schools. How do we be sure that more and more people are aware of them and will tell others about them? So those would be some things I would do.
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It plays right into the next question, right?
Yes. What can parents, educators, and the public do to support their public schools in their community, Superintendent Green?
Right. So, first thing I would say is certainly, be informed. Try to learn as much as one can. Don't just limit folks or your information to just the headlines, particularly the negative headlines, because that will give you a false, sense of what really is going on in our public schools and all the good that is going on. So informing yourselves and then encouraging others to be informed as well. Second, and the strategic plan is going to hopefully give folks a sense of this as well, we all have a part to play in our public schools. That's why they are, in my mind, and that's part of the why they are public. We all need to be engaged, and you need to bring whatever your time and talents will allow. And so it may be everything from being at the local schoolhouse level, the lunch buddy, the reading buddy, the volunteer who helps, with redoing the playground, et cetera, to things much more significant. I shouldn't say more significant, but other things that might operate at higher levels, including, when I say higher levels, talking to members of the General Assembly, talking to your local county commissioners, your school boards about funding issues, even talking now at the national level to decision makers there about what the needs are as well. And this is, and then finally, I think that, we must also appreciate that there are ways for folks to add their support even outside of the public school system. Our children are certainly our students, which make up, I should just note, about 85% of the school age students attend our public schools. So you're going to be supporting the vast majority of our children, but there are other ways to get involved through various youth organizations and things that also support our schools, as well. Certainly, if you have financial resources, we certainly would want those to be, or it may, if not you, your organizations that you may work with or be connected to, find ways to have those dollars also support various initiatives.
Well, and
Excellent.
I'll have
Thank
to
you.
add my 2 cents to this because I adore Shanika and she'll get me for not saying it. Join PTA. I don't have any children in the school system, but I joined my grandson's PTA. I joined the school PTAs in my community because I want to support them and what they're doing because they're part of my neighborhood. So, join PTA, right, Shanika? The other thing is I'm going to take the next 2 questions and kind of put them together since, we're going to try to move towards it a little bit, giving our audience a chance because they've got some great questions. And that is, we were very interested as you've been going out, you've been visiting. What are some of the positive trends that you're seeing in local school districts? And, with the other superintendents out there, we have 115 superintendents. What's kind of going on out there in the field, and what are you seeing that's positive, or what their challenges are? Kind of give us a field report on what's going on out there in our school districts.
Great. So certainly positive trends, things that are worth lifting up are the incredible connections that folks in K-12 are making with other institutions, including our community colleges and universities, and even into the workforce. So one of the most amazing things that we do in North Carolina is we allow high school students to be in early colleges where they can be on college campuses while in high school, to take college courses while still in high school, and at our community colleges, for example, through college and career promise opportunities, so that students are graduating with college credits, potentially credentials at no expense to them. Right. And so we are seeing that continue to grow, and, would want to see that just continue to grow. The most credentials that students have ever earned, they were earned last year. So that's good. These are workforce ready credentials, I should be clear about. Some of the early literacy efforts are showing some early promise, right? So going to the science of reading and looking at results from the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. Many folks will know that as DIBELS, and K3 are showing, positive returns for all subgroups of students. So that's a good thing. The last thing I'll lift up is I spent some time with three superintendents in Western North Carolina, and it just reminded me of how resilient our educators are and how they do the next to impossible, right? And this is who they are. I talk about revering educators, and I can translate that in many other ways, right? I mean, if you talk about an educational system that is so woefully underfunded, and yet we have, almost 87% of our students graduate on time, that we've had this increase in the number of kids who are taking and passing college level courses while still in high school. I mean, these are the sorts of things that are going on going well. Challenges, so I would have to say at the forefront would be funding. And I typically don't start with funding. Folks who know me from when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools would say I would talk about other things before getting to funding, but we have to appreciate where we are in North Carolina. We are woefully underfunding our public education system. If you utilize, for example, the Education Law Center, they do a report annually called Making the Grade, where they compare states and what they do as far as funding and then funding effort. The latest report that came out, I think, is looking back at 2022 data, but essentially said that North Carolina was 48th in the country. If you compare us to the national average, we're about $5,000 less than the national average. And you say, well, that's okay. There are states that, do a whole lot more, and so sure. But then if you compare us to even Virginia and South Carolina, our border states, we are $3,000 to $4,000 less than those states as well. So even right around us, we are. And so now you take that times 1.5 million students, $3,000 to $4,000. You're talking now about real money, real money. So that is and so then it shows up in all the challenges in other ways, recruiting and retaining teachers, having the kind of services for our special education students. I mean, the list can go on and on as to where additional dollars would allow us to do some things that we know we can do. We certainly want to improve student outcomes. I mean, it's not any superintendent that I've spoken with that doesn't want to figure out how to do some things better for all of our students. And so, we're going to continue to focus on, and they're going to continue to focus on those things as well. So that's what I would lift up.
Excellent. We're going to get to our last question so that we can get to some questions from our audience. Superintendent Green, what is a slogan or motto that you use to guide your work, one that helps you to keep a positive focus?
Yeah, so I'm going to share a couple things. One is something that I have said for a long time while I've been in the education circles, including as superintendent of Guilford County Schools and now in this role. Excellence is the only option. Excellence is the only option. And so that's where you heard me earlier say we want to be the best. So when I was in Guilford County Schools, I would say we want to be the best school district in the entire state. What are we going to do to get at it? And by gosh, if you look at some metrics, you will see that Guilford County Schools, while certainly there are others that might challenge us, you can look at things like U.S. News and World Report, and they identify the #1 elementary school in the state, the #1 middle school in the state, the #1 high school in the state, the #1 high school in the entire country. They're all Guilford County schools. When you set your bar high, people will rise to the occasion. Our kids will rise to the occasion. So excellence is the only option. And then second, I would be remiss if I didn't lift up something that I read publicly for the first time at my swearing-in ceremony. My book study partner and campaign manager, a longtime educator, Dr. Misty Williams, wrote a poem called The Promise. It is on our website. You can see it, but it is really the promise about what we've promised for our children with regards to education. So those two things are what drives me and keeps me motivated.
Excellent.
Okay, so we're going to switch over here now to some of our questions, and some of them have kind of been answered as you have gone through your presentation and answering our questions today. But I'll try to skip around a little bit and hit on some of the ones that I think are really key. And someone says, do you see an opportunity to build a campaign around getting rid of vouchers and a way to use that money, you know, for our budget, or to cut some of the fat that's in the budget? I don't know that that you'll be able to say there's fat in the budget, but you know, how I think the question is, what are we going to do to talk to people about vouchers?
Yeah, so I do think that there is opportunity for us to have, and I'll use the word campaign, if you will, around this issue. Yeah, so I want to be sure that folks even understand. So there is some, there have been some polls done that, you know, when people first hear about opportunity scholarship, may not know what they're about, are actually positive about them, not even fully appreciating that it's their own dollars that are their taxpayer dollars. So that's where you hear me now. Every time that I say it, I talk about taxpayer funded private school voucher program, because those same polls, people move in the majority to the negative in thinking that's an appropriate use of their funds, right? So the first thing I think we've got to do is educate more and more people around what's at stake, because when you hear opportunity scholarships, you might think about, well, you know, is this Z. Smith Reynolds providing these dollars, or these foundation dollars that, you know, and so sure, why not allow, you know, if the foundations or others, you know, individuals want to provide these dollars for folks to go to private school. When they hear, and then when they hear that these dollars are now available regardless of income, so that, you know, this past December timeframe, the General Assembly passed legislation that would have middle income and the wealthiest of the wealthy receive these dollars, and they may already have their children in private schools. This, I think, folks start to go, well, hold on, wait a minute. And so I do think that lots can be done around this to, number one, educate, and then I think to mobilize, organize, and then mobilize action to really say we need not continue down this path. Other states have started down this path and have reversed themselves. And so North Carolina didn't, you know, I would argue, why did we go down this path? But we have the capacity, I think, to also reverse ourselves.
This is a wonderful question that someone has put in here. And I'll, Shanika, go back and be looking for some of the budget ones. I don't want to overlook if we could summarize the budget one, but this question I think is important. Someone says, can you give a quick overview of the role and the powers of the superintendent in public instruction? Some people
Sure.
don't understand the powers of the superintendent or the power of the state board in the, you know, in terms of making authority, your authorities or statutes. I think that's an important question, because a lot of people think you can just come in here and fix this, right?
Yes, ma'am. So I think a lot of people are looking to me in my sole capacity to figure out and realign the budgets myself. And so I do think it's important I think it's a great question. So I think about it this way. And can get as much into detail as people want, but I'm going to give you a high level. Think about that the state superintendent of public instruction really serves two major roles. One is to be the chief administrative officer for public schools. So, it tries to, whatever resources comes in, with whatever legislation or directives come from the General Assembly, whatever policies that the State Board of Education might, put in place, this position serves as the administrator, the chief administrator for those things, right? And then the second is to be the chief advocacy officer for public schools. And so if you can imagine then, let's take the budget, for example. I believe that it was critically important for me to be sure that folks knew what the needs are. So, there are a lot of people, and certainly in my prior role as superintendent of Guilford County Schools, I would talk about, well, this is how much we can ask for because we got to balance our budget. In this role, I believe it's important for me to say, here are our needs. Let's be sure folks know those first and that I advocate towards those, recognizing there may and there will be needs to compromise, but you don't start off with compromising. You start off with being the chief advocate for public schools. So in that, hopefully then what you hear is there are many other players that have significant roles in what happens in our public education system. Most specifically, the General Assembly of North Carolina, which in North Carolina, about 62% or so of the dollars come from the General Assembly for our public schools. They're the ones that also set a lot of the legislation, or they set all of the legislation for our public schools at the state level, right? So they're a significant player. The State Board of Education, by the Constitution, both the state superintendent and the State Board of Education are constitutionally established bodies. The state board is the one that's actually authorized to run our public school system, right? They have significant roles to play. The federal government, obviously, given particularly the amount of resources, have a significant role to play. Local boards of education, county commissioners also have significant roles to play as well. So it is a complex system of educating in North Carolina, but if you take nothing else away, chief administrative officer, day-to-day, who's in charge, chief advocacy officer, who is, when no one else is advocating for public schools, you best believe that Mo Green should be advocating for public schools.
Yes, and we're going to hold you to that, Superintendent Green, for sure. We like the advocacy lens a lot. So thank you so much on behalf of NCPTA. We have two questions for you. A significant number of principals are leaving the profession yearly. Is there any focus that you and your administration will have on principal preparation or a focus on strategies to alleviate burnout amongst educators in general?
Yeah, so yes, there will likely be things that will come out of the strategic plan, focus on principals. I recognize, and I think many recognize, that they are critical leaders in this complex web of educating our students. They are the ones that, as far as leadership roles, most closely connected to our students. And so being sure that we address issues related to them will be important. I will just lift up for you in our legislative priorities. We did include a request for a revision to the current principal pay plan to provide a little bit more stability in what principals will pay. Also, we want to have them receive appropriate increases in compensation as well, as they, do their important work. There are some other, things that are sort of embedded in that request, but that is one of our priorities that we did lift up. We are also focused on, made a request for support of our low performing schools and school districts, where much of the work that's necessary to improve low performing schools in particular focuses on being sure that we're providing the necessary supports for our principals to do what they need to do to be able to be effective leaders as well. So those are just a couple things that are in our legislative agenda, but also appreciate this is going. I can't imagine that this will not be a significant part of our strategic plan.
Excellent, rightfully so. Thank you so much, Superintendent Green. Next question, Leandro. We have a couple of folks who've asked some questions about that, so we're going to consolidate that. How do you see us moving forward as it relates to the Leandro ruling? And what else can we do to help our students in low wealth or rural communities?
Yeah. So for those who are on this in this webinar who may not know about Leandro, the highest level, and it's much more complex than this, but you're talking about funding needs for our schools and whether there's adequate funding to support all of the things necessary to provide each and every child what's called a sound basic education under the North Carolina Constitution. So the other thing that I'll say is the Leandro litigation has gone up to the North Carolina Supreme Court a number of times. It's back in the North Carolina Supreme Court waiting a decision. Don't know what the decision will be, but the most recent time it was there, the Supreme Court had said, essentially, in my words, it's time for essentially billions of dollars to be funded flowing into our public school, additional dollars into our public school system. It's now back before the Supreme Court. Don't know what they will do. A lot of folks who are far smarter than me would say they may reverse that order. In the meantime, regardless of where Leandro goes, the issues for which Leandro is based on don't go away. So that when I talked about earlier, the significant underfunding, that issue doesn't go away even if the court says, that whatever they say with regards to funding. So we'll have to figure out how to engage with the General Assembly to improve or increase the amount of funding that needs to go into our public education system. So that's where Leandro is, and we'll see where it goes, but you'll hear in the requests that we've made, lots of requests for lots of additional substantial funding for our public schools. I'm trying to remember the last part of your question.
Rural schools, how we can support and lift up our rural schools.
Our which schools?
Rural.
Rural schools. Yeah. So again, significant part of Leandro, and then significant part of our legislative request also focus on trying to be sure that our rural school systems and schools receive additional funding. Oftentimes we will think about resources in a way that gives our rural or mostly tier 1 communities additional resources as compared to other communities. So that's where you'll see I'm very supportive, for example, with our construction requests that we need to increase the public school fund need-based funds, which will go pretty substantially will go to our rural communities and those schools and school districts. You'll also know that a lot of the other requests that we've made, like, for example, our supporting our low-performing school districts, yeah, it really is in many ways trying to support a lot of our rural school districts. And so you're talking about millions of additional dollars that we're requesting to be of support to those school districts as well.
This is a good question here. Someone said, we know there's tremendous challenges that the public schools face with the General Assembly and the budget. But their question is, what are you the most optimistic about? Do you see any optimistic paths or avenues or things that you do think you can work with the current legislative majority? Are there any promising shining stars out there that we might be able to accomplish?
Yeah, so yes, I do think that there are some opportunities. I think about, for example, what I had mentioned earlier about the students with disabilities and going to more of a weighted system. Yeah, so the General Assembly did put an additional $45 million to support students with disabilities. And so that, I think, may be a preview of additional dollars that they may put in that space. There are any number of requests that we've made that seem like they at least are open to hearing more about them. When you talk about safety and security in our schools, so we're trying to frame, for example, the need for additional social workers and school psychologists and counselors as a safety issue as well, right? And so, we're hopeful of seeing a little bit there. And then certainly we've also asked for increased school resource officers. What we're hearing, what I've heard from a lot of superintendents is this isn't really as it relates to students that they feel like we need additional school resource officers. It's really folks coming to the school with bringing all sorts of issues and maybe very inappropriate behaviors that we need to guard against to be sure that our schools are safe. And I think that that's been an area where the General Assembly, I think, has been open to hearing about those possibilities. I think there are some things, so those are dollar things. I think there are some non-dollar things that there may be opportunities for us to have some conversations about and maybe get some action on. And so we'll just have to see what those, what happens there. But there certainly seems to be some interest in, I was actually with the General Assembly, sort of a joint appropriations chairs for education this morning. And certainly seem to have some interest around what we might do to support students with free and reduced lunch. That's actually a budget item, I should say. There are some mechanisms to get more teachers potentially into our educator prep programs by eliminating the praxis. So students are admitted into like a UNC and then have, which is, I mean, it takes effort to get admitted into UNC, but then we say now to get admitted into your education program, you have to take another exam and not sure that that's a necessary thing to do. I think General Assembly members that we've had some conversations with are interested in that as well.
Thank you, Superintendent Green. Next question. Planned tax cuts are creating a revenue cliff for North Carolina. So what can you do as our superintendent to educate the public about how important it is that we reverse course and fund our schools properly?
Yeah, so hopefully what you've heard tonight gives one lots of thoughts on this issue. Part of doing a Mo Wants to Know tour across the state is I'm primarily listening, but there may be opportunities to address questions, and so we'll put out information even in those contexts. We'll use other vehicles as well to be sure folks are fully aware of, more folks are aware of these issues. But I'm also calling on other folks to do it as well. This can't be the Mo Green show by himself. Organizations like the one who have hosted this event tonight for a long time have done incredible work in trying to be sure folks know about these issues. And so I'm calling on y'all to continue doing that and even more, right? So that even more folks will know about, policy decisions that have been made that are negatively impacting our public schools, and we have clearly the capacity to have some of those reversed.
So we're getting close to the end, and if everybody, if Superintendent, if you can hang in with us a few more minutes, I'm just gonna try to squeeze in a few more things here for our folks, and I'm gonna do two of them as kind of statements. One of the things that were sent in to us was saying, really asking you to please pay attention to and advocate that we are not cutting our agricultural training programs and CTE programs, career technical education programs in our high schools, especially in our rural small areas. They're very concerned about losing federal money for CTE and how that would affect many of our rural high schools where kids are depending on these courses to literally get the trades and skills they need to go to community college or to go into work. So I won't make you answer that, but I'll just put that out there as a concern one of our folks have. Another concern one of our folks have is that they said that we need to do something to help the referral process and evaluation process go quicker so that students can get the help they need faster. And they talked about it, that we're way behind with the influx of COVID this year with our students in pre-K, getting our pre-K kids evaluated and referred is way behind. And so they really want to, and you're welcome to speak to that, but they really want to encourage us to work on how we can improve that process so that more kids get in the program and so forth. So let me stop there with those two comments and see if you had anything you want.
Yvonne, can I sneak one in? I'm sorry. Let's give them three because let's work with three. And so quick one is about, and you touched on this, Superintendent Green, is the teacher preparation program. And this is very near and dear to my heart, and I know Yvonne's as well. Are there any collaboration initiatives, or can they be consideration of collaboration initiatives with your department and your administration and college teacher prep programs to ensure that our graduates are prepared to meet those evolving needs of their students, especially as aligned to the pillars and the priorities that you shared earlier? And I think that's a very important item to add to Yvonne's too. So we'll make it three. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So with regards to career and technical education, so across the state, last year, well, 23-24, I should say, received, almost $43 million to support career and technical education opportunities from the federal government. So this is another dramatic place if they're going to cut, as we talked earlier, depending on what that cut looks like, could have a dramatic impact on CTE opportunities. And we have to understand that if they cut that out or reduce it substantially, there isn't like a plan B. I mean, it isn't like, the General Assembly has already shown that they're underfunding our public education system. So I don't really anticipate that they would be picking those things up and funding them at the same levels, right? So that is where then we're trying to advocate for whatever you do with administering the dollars, you can do, right? If you don't think the Department of Education is the right place, we could debate that, but the dollars must still flow. right? We must still receive those dollars for things like career technical education. And, when you think about in North Carolina, this is a place where I talked about some of the good things going on. This is a significant place where some really good stuff is happening. And so to see any kind of diminishment of this would be unfortunate. We actually ought to be doing substantially more. With regards to the referrals, I'll have to check into that issue to see whether it's something on our administrative side of the house or whether it is a result of insufficient resources that are impacting the number of folks that we have that can deal with these referrals, because this is the kind of thing that folks will raise as concerns, but maybe not everyone is fully appreciating. When you're not receiving the level of resources but still trying to do all the things that one must do, something is going to get delayed, shortcut, eliminated, etc. And so, having said that, I will be sure to follow up to see whether there's some administrative efforts that can be done, regardless of additional resources, to improve those times. And then teacher prep programs, the short answer is yes. We will have their ongoing conversations that we have with the leaders of the teacher prep programs. Certainly, as I come in, we'll continue to have those conversations and meeting with the deans of the teacher prep program sometime, I think, here in March, to engage in that conversation. So yes.
And this is the last question. I'm telling you, Superintendent, that you're getting a lot of great questions. You're getting a lot of go Mo, good luck Mo, keep at it Mo, we're behind you Mo, a lot of support here because people like what you're saying. But this whole issue around DEI, don't use the term DEI, don't use those words, don't use those initials. So several folks are concerned about, what do we do to make sure that, regardless of these mandates, what do we do to make sure that our children feel they belong, feel that their well-being is considered, and so forth? Any comment on that?
Yeah, so I'll start off this way, and I will tell you I'm still sort of working my mind around exactly how I want to say this. So you're hearing a version of it. It may be massaged somewhat over time, but I think again you have to start with an understanding of what public education is. Public education, I would argue, is one of the most significant DEI initiatives this country has ever undertaken. We engage and serve all students, regardless of background, regardless of income, regardless of color, creed, race, ethnicity. It is an equity issue in that public education seeks to serve and provide every child in North Carolina with a sound basic education and to meet the needs of the children where they are to get them to that sound basic education. And it absolutely is inclusive, again, of serving each and every student. So when folks get caught up in disliking DEI and get all sort of bent out of shape, let's bring folks back to one of the amazing miracles of this country is our public education system. It does not have to be this way, but it's been put into constitutions across our country, including North Carolina, that we will do this for the benefit of our children. And why? Because we think it's so critically important to their growth and then the growth of ultimately our country and democracy, economy, etc. Now, are there, at the core, you're talking about providing access to every child, opportunity for every child, and doing it in a fair way. right? And so the work, so folks will take DEI out and get, we'll certainly try to comply with current law. And I would argue that there are some, I think, reasonable disputes over whether there is a true understanding of what, for example, one of the most recent Supreme Court decisions was around not using race for admissions into colleges and how far that goes. And so, at the same time, we'll certainly try to honor the law, but I tell folks, we have still got to do the education of our children, public education. We're not moving away from that. And I think most people, even those who get caught up in the DEI conversation, if we can get folks to step back for a moment and really appreciate how wonderful it is that we have an educational system that provides access, opportunity, and is done in a fair way for all students, is something that we can move forward with.
I can't think of a better way to end our conversation together tonight than with those words. I will tell our guests tonight that we are going to be saving all these questions. I am going to share them with Superintendent Green, not for him to respond, but for him to consider as he's doing his work and doing his planning and working on his strategic plan and going out to visit with others. You'll have an opportunity to see the kind of questions that you are bringing up tonight. In closing, I just want to, Dr. Moore Brown, would you like to say a few things about the PTA before we hang up?
Yes, NCPTA is the oldest and largest child advocacy organization in North Carolina, boasting over 800 plus units across the 100 counties. We are very excited to be partnering with Public Schools First NC always, but also Superintendent Green. We look forward to working with you and your administration as we continue to make every child's potential a reality. We definitely know that it takes a village. And that we know that a part of our roots as an organization, and you even acknowledge your roots as the superintendent and your long history in education, is about advocacy. So please know that PTAs across North Carolina are here with you to support you, Superintendent Green, and those PTA members and leaders across the state who are on the call. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. Your voice does matter. Your voice does count. Turning it back over to you, Yvonne.
And then on behalf of Public Schools First, please connect with us. I would say that Public Schools First does have a position that does not support school vouchers. We support putting public dollars into public schools. And so we are going to have a really important newsletter coming out this Saturday, looking at some of the consequences of lifting the family income ban so that anyone, even wealthy families, could qualify and receive a school voucher. I would say that 88% of the school vouchers go to religious school. We have concerns about separation of church and state and how public dollars are used. But I would encourage you to do exactly what the Superintendent Green said. We had a lot of questions in there also about, teachers not having to be certified if they're working in private schools, but they're getting public dollars. A lot of the things that about accountability. So, and do what we've talked about tonight. Go to our website, publicschoolsfirstnc.org. There's a lot of stuff there on school vouchers, a lot of the facts about who can get funding, who doesn't, a lot of facts about what public schools have to do to get their money and what private schools do not have to do in terms of getting their money. So educate yourself and then make your own opinions. Where you end up landing on this issue will be up to your personal value system, but we encourage you to educate yourself, become informed, and then engage in this whole process. We know that, if you don't get our newsletter, we encourage you to sign up and get it. Follow us on Facebook, social media, because right now, the biggest thing that we can do is to educate ourselves. if we want to really support a robust public education system in North Carolina. Shanika, thank you again, as always, for being my partner. And I appreciate you. And Superintendent Green, it's been an honor. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate that you've taken time tonight to talk to public
The second
education.
time, Yvonne, the second time, because you
Yes.
took our invitation we had, the panel some months ago before you
Right.
got this wonderful
So-
position. So we appreciate you.
And I think that what that says about Superintendent Green is that he appreciates what we're trying to do, which is to bring parents, teachers, educators, students, and the community into the conversation
That's
about the
right.
value of our public schools. So thank you all. Good night, and we'll see you soon.